Lamont Butler and Jaxson Robinson being back could completely change the way Kentucky's matchup with Oklahoma could go.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky's matchup with the Oklahoma Sooners, but some big news at the top about Lamont Butler and Jaxson Robinson's health coming straight from the SEC injury report. I'm so glad I waited to see what was going to happen with Jax and Butler. We got some big news here today, discussing their health, discussing how this matchup could go. Everything could completely change this time tomorrow night. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. And if you've got a final score prediction for this one, leave it in the YouTube comments below. You can also hit me on Twitter at LockedOnUK. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Lamont Butler and Jaxson Robinson are both probable to play against Oklahoma tomorrow night. If you did not see the SEC injury report that broke late Tuesday night, gentlemen, I did not expect this to happen, but Kerr Kriisa out as expected. Instead of being questionable, instead of being out, both Butler and Robinson are listed as probable to play tomorrow against the Sooners. This is massive for the Cats for two different reasons. Number one, it shows you that they're ready to play possibly tomorrow, and that completely changes the way this matchup could go. And then number two, it completely changes the way how the season could end for the Cats. If you listen to the most recent episode of Locked On Kentucky, you heard me say and make the prediction, I think Kentucky's going to win out. I think they are going to win their final 4 games of the regular season, starting with the Sooners on Wednesday. And I gave all my reasons why, and I was kind of talking about how important health could be and how Butler and Robinson being back could be huge. You saw the report from Matt Jones where they were expecting possibly to get Butler back by the LSU game or the Auburn game possibly, and then Jaxson by the LSU game or the SEC tournament. And then you listened to Mark Pope's call-in show yesterday, and he was asked about Jaxson and Lamont, and he said, quote, Lamont and Jaxson were both in practice. They had modified practice, which is a good thing. It's kind of every day right now. It's just we know something from today about how much of the practice they were able to get through. With both of them, we're going to know so much more in the morning because it's just, well, how is Jackson's wrist responding? How is Lamont's shoulder responding? End quote. So, based on the news that we've got, it sounds like Monday's practice and then Tuesday morning and Tuesday's practice ended up going pretty well for both Butler and Jax. Completely changes the way this Oklahoma game could go down, because now you're talking about having a better defensive matchup in Lamont Butler possibly. You're talking about having your leading scorer in SEC play before he got injured, best shooter in SEC play on the squad before he went down. Now, I think the question coming into this one is knowing that, okay, both of them could be available, but do you hold one of them out to make sure that they are as healthy as possible for the Auburn game? Because something that Pope has talked about a little bit, and we've talked about it before on the show, is making sure that once you get a player back, you're not just sitting here going, okay, as soon as he's 70%, we're going to throw him out in the next game and make sure that he gets minutes. Instead, you're going, okay, how do we get him to that 80-85% range where he can go out there and play a game, but also just sustain a hit and then actually compete in more than one game instead of having to get healthy, play a game, get hurt, get healthy, play a game, get hurt. How do you make sure that there's some continuity here, especially now that we're getting closer to the end of the season? Do you hold one of them out? If you do, I think the answer to me is you hold Jax out. I think you have, if you're picking a player to be more involved in this game, I think it's Butler. Butler is more important than Robinson in this game, I think. That's just my assumption. Obviously, these two teams haven't played each other. We haven't seen the matchup, so I can't tell you definitively what's good and what's bad. But what I can tell you is looking at the way Oklahoma is constructed, pretty guard heavy. They have a lot of kids that can handle the ball and shoot. Somebody like Butler can prove to be extremely valuable in this game, especially with the defensive assignment that he could draw, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But I want to ask you guys, what do you think? Should Butler or Robinson be held out if they're both available, by the way? Does Kentucky try and make sure that they get them as healthy as possible for Auburn? If they do play in this game, is it limited minutes? How could that impact it? We're going to dive into more here. Preview this matchup between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Kentucky Wildcats, a must-win game for UK. We'll dive into it in just a second. Before we do it, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at PrizePicks. March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you can pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy, and it keeps every game exciting. This week, I've been looking at Jason Tatum going for more than 29 points and Anthony Davis for more than 12 rebounds once he gets back healthy, of course. It's quick and easy. They've got fast payouts, and they've also got these fun Taco Tuesday deals. They have weekly promos. You can get discounted player projections for even more value. You can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and if you do, you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is PrizePicks. Run your game. Going to pause here for water before we continue along on the late Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Got the Locked On mug, of course. Appreciate you guys watching or listening wherever you are tuned in. If you are not subscribed, subscribe to the show. Would love to have you. If you're watching this for the first time, if you come back to the channel to check out some previews, subscribe. Would love to have you here on Locked On Kentucky, wherever you are tuned in. All right. Kentucky basketball takes on Oklahoma in a huge matchup on Wednesday night. And you may say huge, well, it's a 18-9 team versus 17-10. What's so big about it? Well, it's big for a couple of reasons for Kentucky. Number one, it's a quad one opportunity. I know that a lot of people kind of crap on the bottom of the SEC and say teams like Texas, oh, they're not very good, look at their record. Oh, Oklahoma's not very good, look at their record. But you have to understand, at least in terms of analytics, this is a very good league, top to bottom. There's not an easy out on the schedule, and that includes South Carolina, who just picked up a win this weekend. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm already getting derailed. They beat Texas a week ago. So anyway, Oklahoma, 17-10, 4-10 in the SEC. It's a quad one opportunity for Kentucky, and they need this one to stay on that 3-seed line, which is where they're still projected right now. According to Bracket Matrix, across the board, they are a 3-seed on average. So what do we know about the Sooners outside of their record? Well, they're 5-8 actually versus quad one. They've already got 5 quad one wins, and they're number 51 in the net. So they're comfortably in that quad one range on the road. But you start to kind of look at what they've done in the SEC. They've not beaten a team ranked inside the top 25 of the KenPom rankings. Their wins in conference play are over South Carolina, Arkansas, Vandy, Mississippi State. They were on a 5-game losing streak before beating State this past weekend. They're not good at protecting the rim. They have the 12th best offense in conference play. But then you have to look at the other side of the coin and say, okay, well, what are the positives? Why is this Oklahoma team still favored by a lot of different metrics? Keep in mind, they're top 50 on KenPom, number 51 in the net. Well, they've got some really solid non-conference wins. In fact, they finished their non-conference slate 13-0 before getting into SEC play, where things have kind of gotten rough. I've said this about Texas. I'll say this about basically any team in the bottom half of the league. Any team here, I think in another conference, would have a lot of success. And I don't mean just a little bit. I think they would be significantly better resume and record-wise because of the fact that they'd be playing in a weaker field. And by the way, for those of you that are not SEC people, that you don't pull for a team in the Southeastern Conference, you don't really have a good excuse this year because, well, analytics say this is the best conference in America. It's the best conference we've seen in like 20 plus years. And then also the SEC took everybody else out to the woodshed before entering conference play. And whatever happens in the tournament, I just want to be clear right now. For those of you that are wondering, no, the NCAA tournament is not a reflection of how good the SEC was this season, whether they have success or whether they do not. Full stop. Anyway, talking about taking teams out to the woodshed, Oklahoma in the non-con slate beat Providence, beat Arizona, beat Louisville, beat Georgia Tech, beat Oklahoma State, beat Michigan. Michigan and Arizona being their two best wins. They beat Louisville, who is top 25 on Ken Palm. So they have some really solid non-con victories, all of which I believe were at neutral sites. That Michigan game was crazy, by the way. If you didn't see it, if I'm not mistaken, Jeremiah Fears got fouled on a three-point shot. He hit it, and it was a 4-point play to win it at the end of the game after they were down 4. Crazy. Absolutely insane stuff. So they have a lot of solid non-conference wins, and then offensively, just on the whole, they do some good things. They play with a lot of tempo. They shoot well from inside and outside. They get to the charity stripe. They are a great free throw shooting team. Probably the best Kentucky has faced this season. They get to the line, I think, better than anybody that we've played this year. Tempo. They've beaten some good teams. Yes, they've struggled in SEC play. And then you look at the X factor here, which we'll go ahead and get to the two X factors. Jeremiah Fears, the lead guard for Oklahoma, I think is your X factor here. And you may say, well, he's actually the second leading scorer on this team, which you're right. Jalon Moore leads this team at 17 points per game. But Fears, who is a projected lottery pick, averages 15.9 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, leads the team in assists and steals. Not shooting well relative to his counterpart there in Moore, but still an effective player who can go out and drop buckets. And you could see that in their most recent contest. He's been the leading scorer in 3 straight games against top 25 Mississippi State. He actually dropped 27 in that win. Again, nowhere near as efficient statistically, at least consistency-wise, as Jalon Moore, but he's shooting a ton, and he has been somebody that the Sooners have relied on heavily whenever they... Now, I cannot believe my phone managed to drop out of my pocket. I thought it was snug in there. Anyway, we move. Fears is a phenomenal player. He is, I wouldn't say an undersized guard, but he's not a lengthy kid. They've got him listed at 6'4". I think he's like 6'3", 6'2", and man, can he handle the ball. Just a pure score. Dude knows how to go out there and get a bucket. Yeah, he's shooting less than 30% from 3, but don't let the statistics fool you. This kid can get hot at any given moment. The X factor for Kentucky. If Butler does not play, which if Butler does play, he is the X factor here because he's going to be matching up against Fears, which we'll get to keys to the game here in a minute. But the X factor, if Butler doesn't play, is Andrew Carr. I think Andrew Carr could be big in this game. Obviously, you saw him hit, 4 3-pointers against Alabama. I think all of them came in that first half, or at least 3 of them did. But I'm really more focused on what Carr could be doing down low. He seems to have gotten healthy, and he's going back to his old ways where he's making some moves in the post, and he's getting to the rim, he's dunking the ball. I don't want to get clipped here, but I don't think Oklahoma has a ton of physicality. Now, I think it's clear that Kentucky doesn't either. I think that's pretty objective relative to some of the other teams in this league. But if you're looking at these two teams just kind of play things out, Oklahoma, I think, has less physicality than Kentucky. I think that's reflected in their rebounding stats, which, again, we'll get to that in keys to the game. But I think Carr down low could find himself having a day, especially if Williams draws too much attention. Because of the way that Amari Williams has been playing as of late, efficient, scoring at the rim, passing the ball well, I think you can do some inside-out stuff here. I don't mean inside-out like kicking stuff out for a 3. I mean inside-out, or outside-in, rather, I should say, where you've got Williams at the top, and he's throwing the ball in or passing to Carr, who is finishing. And I think, well, again, we'll get to it in a minute, but I think that the rim will become significantly important for Kentucky in this game if they want to win it, despite Mark Pope talking about how important three-point shooting is and about how volume's important. I think the rim is going to be key, crucial. So, your X factors, Carr, Fears. If you want to look at some of the other statistics here with Oklahoma, I mean, if you want to switch over to conference play again, 12th in the SEC in efficiency, 13th on defense. Defensively, they are bottom 10 in effective field goal percentage, turnover, offensive rebound percentage, free throw rate, 2-point field goal percentage, free throw percentage, block percentage. They're 8th in three-point percentage, but 32.5%. If Kentucky does end up jacking up some threes, they're going to hit enough to make it a problem for the Sooners. So defensively, they're bad, like pretty bad, and they cannot keep teams off the foul line. Offensively, they've still been able to shoot well and get to the line, but outside of that, they can't grab boards. They're turning the ball over a ton, actually. 19.3% of their possessions. They're getting blocked. They're getting stolen. They're throwing the ball out of the bounds. It's not as polished as you might think. So what are the big keys here? What does Kentucky got to do with these numbers and these matchups? Well, again, we'll get to that in a second. Just want to remind you guys, if you've not subscribed, would love to have you. If you've not checked out the Locked On Kentucky Discord, I believe I've got that pinned at the top of my Twitter at Locked On UK. Would love to have you. We move. Water. Okay. Keys to the game here. I've got 4 to close this one out. Number 1, regardless of whether or not Lamont Butler plays, you have to make somebody besides Jeremiah Fears beat you. He's on a tear right now, and I understand that Jalon Moore is a really good player. At 6'7", he can handle the rock, he can drive in, he can shoot from beyond the arc. He's shooting 38% from 3. Kid's a weapon. But Fears is the other volume guy, and he's the one that makes this offense go. 4 assists, that leads the team, right? Kobe Elvis averages 3 assists per game, but outside of that, you're not really getting a ton of distribution in this offense. At least it doesn't really seem like it. So if you take Fears out of the equation, at least to some degree, players like Moore have to step up. Duke Miles has to step up. Goodine has to step up. Elvis has to step up. Sam Godwin, who had a really good game against Mississippi State, he's got to step up. I mean, Godwin's the only guy here that's like on the roster down low that you could have problems with. But it's all about initiation. It's all about getting him set up in the right spot. And if you are able to make Fears give up the basketball or force him into bad shots, it's going to be difficult for Oklahoma, I think, to stay ahead of Kentucky's entire roster, especially if one or both of Jaxson and Butler are back. For Kentucky offensively, you cannot settle for jump shots. If you are going to make a decision on offense, it has to be one of 2 things. It has to be a 3. It has to be an outside shot. Work for it, even if it's semi-open. Take it if that's what you're being given. Or it has to be directly at the rim. I need good shot selection. Pristine shot selection in this game. Make them foul you if you want to get to the rim. They will. Which brings me to my third key here. You have to win the free throw line. A lot of what the keys to the game are, it comes down to, I think, discipline for Kentucky on both ends of the floor. You have to win the free throw line. And a lot of that is going to be playing good defense at the rim without fouling. You've got to have Amari, Garrison, Brea, whoever it may be, Owe. You have to be able to play defense in this game without fouling as much as Oklahoma draws them. The rim is the most important thing in this game by far to me. You have to be aggressive at the rim and draw fouls, and you have to prevent the opposing team from doing so. If you can do that and put Fears under some pressure, you've got a great chance to win the game. And the final key here, if you do 3 of these, you're going to have a really, really good time. If you do all of these, I do not see a way you lose, barring Oklahoma just going ape crap like Ole Miss did, shooting the ball. Win the free throw, grab offensive rebounds. You have to grab second chance boards in this one. Get as many opportunities as you can. Look, even if you're not hitting, Oklahoma plays with some tempo. Take as many possessions away from them as possible. Take as many seconds away from them as you can. If this gets chaotic, control the chaos. If this gets a battle of free throws, control the free throw line. If this becomes a battle of boards, grab the boards. I want to note here, Oklahoma in SEC play is 15th on offense in grabbing second chance rebounds and 13th on defense in allowing them. 32.7% of opponent shots are rebounded by the opposing team. There are a lot of numbers here to indicate that Kentucky can win. There are a lot of matchups I think that Kentucky can exploit. I think that Fears and Moore are great players. You take one of them out, it makes it very difficult for the Sooners to operate at a level where they can win the game. They can certainly compete. I don't know if they can win. Combined with the fact that Butler or Robinson or both players could be back, I do not see Kentucky dropping this one. I expect them to win. I expect them to win not by a significantly comfortable margin, but a margin larger than what reports are being, or what's being reported. Kim Palm has Kentucky winning by 2. I think the line opened at 2.5 on FanDuel. I think Kentucky wins by 7 to 10 points. This is a game you cannot afford to drop. You have to come in with a fire, with a passion, with an intensity, and you have to go in there and not manhandle them, but manhandle them. I think this is a game where you have to go out and show out. Style points matter, I think, especially as we get closer to the tournament. If you could get a big win here, that'd be great. All I'm concerned about is winning, period. But I think the opportunities are going to present themselves, and all Kentucky's got to do is just take advantage of them. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you could follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and God bless.